This is such a powerful reading. I was looking back last night to see when I last gave this talk, and I saw that it was 5 years ago because a story came to mind that I think I've only given it twice. Thanks, Jeremy. Thank you. But there's a story that I'm going to tell again that I've told each time. So I thought, gee, I better make sure it wasn't last year and the year before and the year. But it wasn't, and there's enough of you who are here that are new. But before I get back there, I was just thinking when I was listening to the reading again, Swami Kriyananda gave a rather extraordinary talk on this topic. I wasn't even going to mention it today, so I don't have all of the details of that talk available, but I did listen to it yesterday. It wasn't exactly called Does Satan Exist, but what is the purpose of Satan, or something like that. It's a profound talk, and he talks in great depth about the whole concept of manifestation from this state of superconsciousness to the physical plane. And he explains, again, as he does many times, because it's an essential concept for us, about the whole notion of duality, which means, just because there are a few new people here, if everything is made manifest from the state of super consciousness or all consciousness that existed before anything was manifested. I feel like I say this every talk that I give, but it's impossible to speak about our teachings without really getting this. So as soon as I see one new person here, I feel like I have to at least give a sentence or two about it, that the only way to keep existence, to keep the world, the physical plane in existence, is to have a balance of energy, so all energy is not just finding itself back into that state of perfect unity with the divine. If we all just were able to realize that aspect in ourselves, there would be no world. Now, as we always say, why does there have to be a world? We're going to leave that to much greater minds than me, but because there is, this duality has to exist. Energetically, there have to be these currents of cosmic energy, many of them positive, uplifting, filled with light, filled with joy, and just as many of them negative, downward, keeping us, again, away from our home, our existence, that state of existence really with the divine. So as many forces as there are pulling us out into this place of delusion, this state that we're separate, there are as many forces that we could tap into that say, no, we're all one. We are all one. And that doesn't mean much to most of us until we have experienced that oneness. Once we've experienced it, we know it to be true. But until then, we're all drawn out into this physical world. We're all drawn out thinking that we're separate, thinking that happiness lies outside of ourselves. Swamiji makes the point, which is how I got into all of what I just said, that because we live in a time, and we still do, although we're moving more and more into an age with a deeper understanding of energy and magnetism, but we live in a time of tremendous scientific discovery. And we're living still in a time where science is so highly respected that what we want is to be able to see those things, believe in those things that science can prove, because that's what we respect. Having gone through Stanford Medical School, I came up against this constantly. No matter what, the question was always, has it been proved? And has it been proved pretty much meant, was there a study that was done with controls and a perfect scientific study that has shown this? So, you know, the scientists are still putting electrodes and whatnot on people's heads and hearts and everywhere else to try and prove that meditation works. That's not a bad thing, actually, because since so much of the world doesn't meditate yet, it is great to be able to get up and say, I just read a great study that shows that if you meditate, your blood pressure will come down. I just read a great study that says if you meditate, you will tolerate chemotherapy better than those people who don't. So I'm not against science by any means, but Swamiji's point was it's very hard to talk about Satan, the whole concept of a devil, to a group of people who want something to be proved. And he says, this is him, not me, that when the image of Satan has been that of a little being dressed in all red with horns and beady little eyes, he said, you know, it's terrifying for people. And they don't really want to believe that that exists, because that is how they've seen Satan. They don't have any basis in discovering Satan the way we speak about it, the way Yogananda and these teachers and Swami Kriyananda have spoken to us as Satan being those streams of consciousness that take us away from this entire, the real essence of who we are, which is pure divine energy, pure love, pure bliss. But of course, we come in and we forget that. So everything that would help us forget, that would hold us in that state of forgetfulness, we call Satan. We call it delusion, we call it many things, but for people who are looking for a spiritual path, not just this path, by the way, but any true spiritual path, you come to see very quickly that there is a huge force pulling us away from that state of deep inner peace, of true love, of compassion for all human beings, of acceptance of the fact that whatever comes to us in our life comes to us for our own spiritual good. Now, this struggle that we have about believing that all the time, really remembering it, is what both this reading and next week's reading, How Do We Pass Our Tests, is all about. It's about how do we tune in and remember the basis of this reading of the temptation of Christ from the book of Matthew is so beautiful. And I remember 5 years ago going back and reading the Bible, because I didn't grow up with the Bible. I was Jewish. I didn't read the New Testament. So I didn't really know what the temptation of Christ was until I came onto this path. And I feel like I'm still learning a lot about all of that. But when you look at those temptations, when you look at the whole story, here was Jesus who was getting ready to do this great work that he was asked to do, the reason for his incarnation. This is what was happening. He was coming to that point. He was not there yet. He wasn't doing all of the work that we read about every Sunday. This hadn't happened. And in order to prepare himself, he went into this 40-day and 40-night fast, right? No food, no water. He fasted for 40 days. He was baptized by John, and he comes out of that, and he's immediately, I don't have the words here from the reading today, but he's drawn up, it says that, drawn up by this divine force to be confronted by Satan. And these are the temptations that he's faced with. The first one, Satan says to him, if you are who you say you are, and the if is important, it's in every one of the temptations. So we already see how Satan's working. We see how Satan means delusion. How is delusion working? It first instills this doubt in us. Could this be true? Am I good enough to be here on this path? Does Master love me as much as he loves everybody else? Satan instills this element of doubt. Just the word, if you are who they say you are, you must be hungry. Well, of course he was hungry. He hadn't eaten anything for 40 days. He said, turn these stones into bread. Now, that could be very tempting to go about moving the world around and making it be what you want it to be. There's nobody in this room probably who can't remember a moment where we just like to rearrange things a little bit to have it look like we want it to look like. So Satan says, go ahead, turn the stones into bread. But Jesus wasn't fooled. He gets ready to pass the first test. And he said, our God tells us that we do not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes out of the mouth of God. Now remember, he had just spent 40 days. He knew he didn't have to eat. He knew he didn't have to drink. He was living on pure prana, pure energy of God. And we've seen this. Many saints since then have shown us by not eating that when we refine our energy enough, we don't really need food. We do, most of us do, because we're not quite there yet. But Jesus already knew he might be hungry right now, but he didn't need that food. So he said to Jesus, no, I'm not fooled by you. I know that I live on the words that come out of the mouth of God. And of course, we know that that means all of the vibration of the divine, the prana that fills us. This is what he said. This is the first temptation. So he passes that. And when Jesus sees that Satan sees that he can't fool Jesus, he takes him up to one of the highest turrets of the temple in Jerusalem. And he says to him, throw yourself off of this height. If you are who they say you are, who you say you are, throw yourself off of this temple. Let us see if God can put you back together again. Can God do that? And Jesus is saying, come on, show me. But I'm sorry, I keep getting these characters confused. This is not good. Satan is saying that. And Jesus says, no, I will not question. I will not doubt. I will not put God to the test. I won't do that. I trust in the Lord. Jesus saying, I know what God can do. Of course I know what God can do. And I will not tempt him. Yogananda told us in many different stories, but he always says, don't test God. You remember there was a story in the autobiography. Because who are we to test God? How would we even know how to put a test in front of God in his infinite greatness? That would be absurd, actually. So Yogananda told two of his disciples he felt they were sloppy. They would tend to leave doors unlocked. They just didn't take care of their things. And he said, don't leave anything in your car in this story that you're worried about. There is, of course, the cauliflower story as well. Many stories where the devotee wants to say, no, I'm not worried. I have God protecting me. They actually said that to Yogananda. And he just, of course, in his all-knowingness, let them behave the way they wanted to behave. And whatever was in the car was stolen. But he said that is presumptuous. Yogananda's words. We cannot be presumptuous with God. So Jesus now passes the second test. Now, again, if we relate these things to our lives, how much we would love to think in the first instance that we could recreate the world the way we wanted to. In this instance, that we don't need to be that careful. We can tempt fate a little bit. God will be there. God will be watching us. But Jesus tells us, no presumption where God is concerned. And then the last test, somebody might have to help me out here. The last temptation is, oh yeah, I'll give you thank you. Satan says, and we're going to hear this in this music that'll be sung after the talk today. Swamiji writes it so beautifully. And I didn't know this song was going to be sung until I walked in, but we can pretty much guess with this reading most years it is. The Temptation of Christ, it's called. But Satan says to Jesus, you see everything down there, everything, all the riches, all the money, everything that you ever wanted, he says to Jesus, I will give you that if you just love me. And what does Jesus say? Satan, get thee behind me. This is what you'll hear. These are Swamiji's words. They're not the exact words from the Bible. But he's saying, I don't want anything that you can give me in this world. I'm not dependent on material wealth or anything in the material world to know God, to trust God, to feel that love. My Father can give me everything. And so, really, with these three temptations, he passes all of the tests. I read an interesting article last night by somebody, not one of our teachers, but he said, if you look at these three temptations and you look at the ways that you're or we are all tempted, first we have to be very honest about it, but if we look at those ways, every one of them would fit into one of these categories: wanting to rearrange the world, our desire for physical wealth, our desire to own everything, our desire to believe that we can be haphazard and there will be some force there taking care of us. Every time we're tempted, we can fit it into one of these three categories, which is, of course, probably the whole reason for the temptation of Christ. He didn't need to prove that he wouldn't be tempted. He needed to show us how not to be tempted. The story that I was going to tell you at the beginning is, now in 2018, when I gave this talk, I said this happened at least 10 years ago. So now it's at least 15 years ago. I was relatively new at giving a talk here on a Sunday morning. It's a little stressful to get up here in front of all of you and half the world and speak about these incredible teachings. And it was Saturday night, and Asha was giving service the next day. And I was, well, it doesn't even matter where I was, but it was 10 or 10:30 at night, and my phone rang. And I know some of you have heard this story. And I looked at my phone, and it was David Praver calling me. And I knew in an instant that he was calling me to ask me to give service the next day. It's 10:30 at night. I think in those days I prepared for the better part of a week. I took my phone and I pushed it under my pillow and I turned my back on it. It was, I mean, how much of like a child is that? I do not want to know this. I hid from it. This is a true story. David called me 3 times. Each time, I swear I can still see it. I would lift the pillow up. Who else was going to be calling me at 10:30 at night? And I'm standing there saying, like a child, no, 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 no. I knew what was happening. Finally, I said to myself, you know you're going to say yes. You have to say yes. The sooner you say yes, the more time you'll have to prepare. So I picked up my phone, and sure enough, it was David. And he said, Swamiji, they were on their way back from the village. They were in 2 cars. David was behind Asha. Not that that really matters, but to me it mattered because I was hinging on every word. He said, Swamiji wants Asha to stay at the village for another few days to help him with this talk, to transcribe this talk, or whatever he was writing, a book that he was writing. So I said to David, of course I'll do it. I didn't tell David at that point that I was hiding my phone under the pillow. I would have thrown it under the bed if I could have. But you know, literally before I spoke to David, this is true, I was standing in the bedroom, staring at my pillow, willing it to be other than what it was. And I said to myself, what are you going to say tomorrow? I didn't know what the talk was. I wasn't giving it. What will you say tomorrow when you have to explain why you didn't pick up on the first 4 calls? And right away I said to myself, you're going to say to David, the devil made me do it. That's what came to mind. But you know, one of the things that I've realized subsequent to that is that it's true. The devil, as we think of it, that is what made me do it. I mean, then it just, first of all, I was in such a state of terror that I wasn't thinking all of this. But the next day I came, I didn't watch that service, by the way. I have no idea how long ago it was. I'll never watch it. But I do remember that I stood up here and I told this story about hiding my phone. But it was the devil, because those are the ways that we're drawn to our more contracted states. Those are the ways that we want to say no or excuse ourselves or not want to expose the weaknesses in ourselves. All of that, we could just talk about it on and on. All of our habits, all of our addictions. And I don't just mean addictions like drugs or alcohol or any of the other things in the world we can be addicted to. I mean gossip, I mean greed. We all have these. We just wouldn't be here if we didn't. And the ways that we're drawn to them, all of that is what Yogananda and then Swamiji tells us are Satan. That's what it is. So all of those things that keep us separate, that keep us smaller than who we are, that would have us think, even think that we needed things. I'm not talking about food and shelter. I'm talking beyond that. In the physical world, the only reason we think that is because we forget who we are. And in that state of forgetfulness, we run around and around and around looking for it. I'm just in the process of writing a book, and I was just telling this story in the book the other day, again, a story that we all know, but because I'm writing the book for the general public, I included this story of the musk deer, which Master used to tell often. Why did he tell that story often? These musk deers that live in India that have within them a pouch where actually musk, the fragrance of musk, it comes from this. It's generated in their bodies. And he tells this story. I don't know if the story is true, but it's true for every one of us. We're not making musk in our pouches, but the point of the story is true, that the deer spends its whole life looking for that fragrance which is intoxicating to it. Literally, Master uses that word, until it gets so wound up that in this crazed effort to find it, one day it hurls itself off of a mountainside and it plummets to its death, when all the while that which it was seeking was inside of itself. If we were attuned deeply enough to God, we actually wouldn't need food. We actually really wouldn't, because food is, of course, simply a form of energy. We are energy. We are living in a sea of energy. When we learn how to transmute all of that energy, that will be what sustains us. That is the whole point of Kriya Yoga. That's the whole point of meditation, of everything that Master Swamiji came to teach us. There's no other reason. But first, we have to be willing to look at ourselves. And I'll just share one more very brief story. The teaching this week and the temptation of Christ we could talk for hours about it, but this is a precious story, so I'll end with it for those of you who haven't heard it. Jyotish and Devi, Nayaswami's Jyotish and Devi, who are the spiritual directors of Ananda Worldwide, have a son. Mark is now a grown man with two of his own children. But when he was about 4 years old, he walked up to Devi one day and he said, "Mommy, I didn't do it." And Devi looked at him and said, "Where, honey?" That's it. I mean, in her infinite wisdom, this is really, in essence, her name, Divine Mother. It's like God saying it to us, because we don't always reveal our shortcomings, even to ourselves. When we try and hide these things, how can we possibly work on them? When Jesus passed these tests, all of them, to show us how to do it, the words that he went up on that mountain with are, "This is my son, in whom I am well pleased." And it goes on. God tells him, so he climbs this mountain knowing. And God is trying to say those same things to us. Let us all look at everything that we see in our lives that frighten us, or those temptations to hide what we don't want to look at, right up to and including fear of death under the proverbial pillow. That's what it all is. The story's funny, but it's not really funny. I was serious about getting away from that phone. And just like I would be serious about facing a lot of other fears and shortcomings, our job is to remember that we are here to attune ourselves to those very positive, light-filled streams of consciousness. Satan tries to control us. When we tune into those light-filled streams of consciousness, God is always there to guide us. When we turn away from him, we give up our free will. We give up all of what he can give us to help us through this life, to find our way home. When we turn toward him, he just lifts us up and takes us there. He helps us climb the mountain. He shows us the truth so that we're not living in this state of delusion. God bless you all.
Behold all the wonders God's grace can bestow, if you but reclaim what you've given. Why not ask of God any wonder you crave? Worship me to satisfy all human needs. Dominion now over all this noble earth. All I ask of you is worship me.
Get thee behind me, Jesus declared. Satan, know you not our Father offers love in your stead. His gift of love to all is my only food. He is all I own. What does man need but him?
Then the darkness lifted, love destroyed Satan's power. Then at last the Savior could begin bringing all to God. For he taught them in freedom, wanting not in return. All he offered was perfect peace, perfect freedom of soul.
God is all I love, he is all there is. Wise is he who says, I am wholly his.
God is all I fear. Lo, my throne of power, shaken by his love, was destroyed in the hour.
Throughout all the world, a new spirit was born. Jesus brought to men's hearts hope for those steeped in sin.
God is all I love, he is all there is. Wise is he who says, I am wholly his. God is all I love, he is all there is. Wise is he who says, I am wholly his.